Previously on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Go watch the first video of what I did talking about this season, or the first season even. Wow, this was a fantastic intro, I'm glad I left it in. I'm basically watching all the way through Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is going to be covering the first 11 episodes of Season 2. Season 2 has 22 episodes, and we're not going to talk about all of them in a single video, or we will be here for literal hours. Probably just the 1 hour, but all the same, it's far too much. Anyway, let's get on with the show! Episode 1. When she was bad. Buffy returns from summer vacation sporting a major attitude and suffers recurring nightmares involving the Master. The Anointed One and his followers plot their revenge. Well, remember last episode when I was talking about how I basically wanted the show to focus a little bit more on the darker side of things and be slightly less silly and goofy the entire time? Well, this is the episode that focused on Buffy's trauma after she literally died at the hands of a master vampire. I really enjoyed the fact that they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, and they were like, oh no, let's read up on this and see if she's like possessed in any way or if something's happened to her over the summer holidays. She's not the Buffy we remember. And then it turned out that no, it was just because she's literally dealing with trauma. I was really hoping one day they'd subvert expectations by having someone acting odd, and then it just turns out it was a personality thing and not a spooky mystical thing. So yeah, this was a pretty fantastic first episode of Season 2, if I'm perfectly honest. It shows all of our characters that we're familiar with in a new light after they've had some months away from, monster slaying. Xander is still a bit of a jealous, annoying bastard, but I think they are moving him more towards a relationship with Willow, at least at some point in the future. First of all, he nearly smooch, and then he pretends it never happened because he's an asshole. But then I think my favourite thing is when Buffy finds Xander in the library, and he's so pissed off with her, he says something along the lines of, whatever's going on for you, I officially don't care. If they hurt Willow, I'll kill you. That was sweet, in a threatening kind of a way. We like that, Xander. Give us more of that, Xander. I like how they're doubling down on Cordelia just being okay with things, in the fact that her biggest concern about being hung upside down by a group of vampires who wanted to sacrifice her to bring back the Master Vampire was that she got stains all over her clothes. I enjoy Cordelia far more than I should. Episode 2. Some assembly required. Two science club nerds use body parts to create the perfect girlfriend for a teenager who has been brought back from the dead. Fuck. Not doing that a second time. I'm glad I didn't read the synopsis on this one before watching, because that's kind of a spoiler. Like, when the guy's brothers stepped out of the shadows, I was like, oh. But yeah, this is very much meant to be reminiscent of Frankenstein, with Victor creating Frankenstein's... Oh, well, he's Frankenstein. But Victor creating the monster, the quote-unquote monster, who then wants a bride because he's so lonely. In this episode... the guy who was brought back, Daryl, he doesn't say anything about being lonely. He just seems really creepy and horny. He also happens to be Cordelia's ex-boyfriend, so naturally when he kidnapped her and brought her back to his lair, she took one look at him and was like, ah! Giles was particularly great in this episode, how he just wasn't on the game at all because he was too focused on... Did you just say... date? Also, I gotta admit, I did feel slightly sorry for Cordelia at the end when she was like... Ah, Xander, thank you for saving my life, and he was just like, shut up, go away, I don't like you. Slightly mean. Episode 3. School Hard. Buffy's mother and friends become trapped inside Sunnydale High School when a vampire named Spike launches an attack against the Slayer. Holy bollocking chimneys, the British vampires turned up and stuff. Now, like I said in the previous video, and full spoilers for the entire show ahead, I do know that Buffy and Spike end up getting together, he ends up getting a soul, all this kind of stuff. But I didn't know quite how evil he started out as. This is really interesting to see. He's only gone and got himself a bloody British vampire girlfriend and all, isn't he? I'm gonna have some fun with this. He's probably the most charismatic and funny character that I've seen on screen throughout the entire show so far, so that's pretty cool. This show was lacking some good villains. I think the fact that he only went and dusted the Anointed One in it is probably indicative of how they're trying to get rid of the old villains and bring in new ones, and Spike's easily better than just some creepy kid who didn't really do anything and ordered vampires around. It's also a lot of fun to watch Spike and Buffy interact, knowing where they end up later on. It's also really fun to see all of the characters in the school setting being set upon by vampires and seeing how close the truth coming out, where Buffy's mother sees her fighting these supernatural creatures
clearly she knows something's going on there. The headmaster also gives away that he might know something more when he's telling the police about a cover-up story instead of, actually saying, holy hell, what the hell was all that about. It were pretty gosh darn good.
Episode 4. Inca Mummy Girl. A beautiful Inca princess who was buried alive in a tomb 500 years ago is brought back to life.
First of all, are we just not going to address the fact that the death of the real exchange student was the fault of Buffy for being whatever she said, like 40 minutes late? And then when they find out that he's dead, it's just like, oh no, but that means that so-and-so is the mummy, and then they don't give a second thought to the guy that died. I don't know why I'm complaining about the lack of people caring that characters have died in this series, or the lack of consequences of that happening, because, I mean, come on. In this episode, Willow finally realizes that maybe Xander isn't going to wake up and realize that she exists.
Not for a few seasons yet, anyway.
Also, Xander fruitlessly pursues his feelings for the Chosen One, except this time it's not Buffy, it's a different Chosen One. I guess he has a type. I definitely felt slightly sorry for the Inca Mummy Girl, but she did do some murders, so not that sorry for her at the end of the day, but still, it was kind of tragic. And I think this is probably one of the first times that we've had a Monster of the Week episode where it's like, the Monster of the Week is actually someone who you can feel sorry for. Also, we saw what's-his-face for the first time, the dude with the weird goatee and the spiky hair. I think he's a recurring character at some point in the future, isn't he? I guess I'll just have to keep watching to find out. Finally, I forgot to mention, I do appreciate that Xander did ask the Incan Mummy Girl if she was secretly a giant praying mantis. He definitely acknowledges that he has had some mishaps in the past.
Episode 5. Reptile Boy. Buffy and Cordelia attend a frat party where they are offered as human sacrifices to a reptile-like creature.
These titles are getting less and less imaginative. I mean, first of all, there wasn't even a reptile boy, there was just a reptile demon, and boys helping it. Like, it's inaccurate. So this episode focused on Buffy getting overwhelmed by all of her responsibilities and how Giles is like, slay vampires all the time, don't do anything that's even remotely social, even though she seems to have way more of a social life than I have ever had. But it's just not enough of a social life for a 16-year-old girl. So she lied to Giles. How bad? Don't lie to Giles, you'll make him sad. I gotta say though, my favourite part of this episode was when Willow kicked off and had a mood and told Giles and Angel just exactly what they were doing wrong and then stormed off. I was like, yes, Willow, have some attitude. Man, I gotta say though, this episode was like a nightmare scenario for me. Not the giant reptile demon kidnapping and feasting on young girls, that's a bit specific. No, the frat party where everything was chaotic and weird and leery and gross and drunk and blech. Also, I gotta say, I noticed in this episode that Buffy really is starting to change from the character at the beginning of the series where she was really carefree and constantly quipping and doesn't really care, and oh my god, all that kind of stuff, to where now she's a little bit more serious, and even though she still quips and stuff, she's a little bit more serious, a little bit more moody, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a Buffy I remember. And I mean, Willow does say she's 16 going on 40, so I guess it's just kind of an episode where they show that she's becoming a little bit more like what we saw of her in episode 1 of this season is very much something that stays. It's not just a one-time thing. Like, she's not doing it to the point where she's pushing all of her friends away or anything like that, like she was in the first episode, but she's definitely not quite as carefree as she used to be.
Episode 6. Halloween. On Halloween, Buffy and her friends patronize an unusual costume shop where customers turn into whatever costume they are wearing.
This episode was really good. Bit of a slow start, but you know, it had everything. It had bloody Spike in it. It had Willow realizing that she's actually kind of a badass. It had Giles' intrigue that I did not know about, but the second it started I was like, ooh, yes, more of this please. The exploration of the character dynamics was done really well this episode. It was pretty fun to see them all interact. Buffy and Willow and Xander actually felt like a trio of friends for once, instead of just people who happen to be together solving crimes. Well, you know, spooky crimes. Oh, and Oz was in it again, but I don't know. So far he's just popped up in 2 episodes and gone, hey, Willow's pretty cute, and then disappeared again, so interesting character introduction. This was one of those episodes that makes me immediately want to watch the next episode, so I think we can chalk it up though with some of the best. Oh, and how could I forget Buffy suffering from being turned into a 18th century woman who's going, oh my, I need somebody to come shave me. That was pretty fucking funny.
Episode 7. Lie to Me.
Buffy is lured into a trap by a group of undead wannabes who hope that Spike will make them vampires in exchange for giving him the Slayer. Yes, I'm always going to say Slayer like that. Another corker of an episode, and I promise it's not just because it still had Spike and Drusilla in it. But, you know, correlation and all that. No, I really like this episode because it had a very clear theme of blurring the lines, where Buffy learns that it's not all just about good or evil, from the most potent extremes of vampires and murder and love and all that, but also from smaller aspects like friends and trust. For instance, Buffy learns about what Angel did to Drusilla, some of the worst things he did when he was a vampire, and it kind of shakes her image of him, which, on another note, was really important to do because this episode is also about a group of teenagers who worship vampires, and Buffy could arguably fall into that category in a different kind of a way. It's important to show that she's still more grounded in reality than that group. Buffy's trust in her friends is shaken when she learns that Willow, Xander, and Angel, of all people, or vampires, decided to team up and investigate something without her behind her back about someone that she was interested in. I would also argue that Buffy saw a different side to vampires when she threatens Drusilla's life and she sees Spike basically doing anything to save her, which is a kind of a weird twisted form of love, which is weird for a vampire. And most importantly for this episode, she learns that one of her oldest friends, I guess, from LA, isn't who he said he was. He isn't a good guy. He's actually a pretty terrible guy. But even then, later on, we learn why he's doing the things that he's doing. And while it doesn't justify it, it does make us sympathetic towards him to a certain degree. And again, it blurs the lines of what's good, what's evil, why do people do things. It's all summed up in a very nice speech at the end of the episode where Buffy's talking to Giles and saying, you know, why can't it be as simple as good versus evil and all that kind of stuff. And he's just like, well, it's not. You learn that as you grow up. There's a lot more nuance to life. I'm paraphrasing heavily here because I watched this at 3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. But it was one of my favourite scenes in the show so far. Also, it had Spike and Drusilla in it, didn't it? I like that we're learning more things about the characters as we're going forwards. Like, we got that interesting tidbit about Giles earlier. We learned more about what Angel got up to earlier. It's cool. It's like a TV show that you watch and the characters do developing things. One nitpick I do have about this episode, and it's very much a byproduct of it being based around teenage characters, but it is still annoying, is that at the end of the last episode we saw Buffy getting all lovey-dovey with Angel, and it's like, wow, they're finally, gonna do the relationship thing. And then the next thing you know, she sees him talking to one woman vampire, and she's like, right, that's it, I'm out, I'm gonna get all chummy with my old LA friend who's just popped up, he's my new boyfriend. I mean, it was fine in the context of this story, but when it happens like every 2 episodes, it gets a little annoying. Also, Jesus Christ, if I was Buffy, Willow and Xander, I would just give up on pursuing love interests, because they always turn out to be some supernatural, mythological, or a horrible thing, and if it's not that, then it's someone starting a cult of people who want to get murdered and turned into vampires. I mean, honestly, just give up at this point. Episode 8. The Dark Age. Giles' past comes back to haunt him as a demon he and Ethan Rayne summoned in their wild youth seeks him out in Sunnydale. We learn about Giles' dark past and that he played guitar. Also helped summon a demon that got one of his friends killed or something like that. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention to that part. I always love episodes that give established characters more depth and that kind of thing, and this was very much obviously a Giles themed episode. Why am I even talking about that? You already know that! One of the things about this episode that I cannot get over is that Giles wakes up, has a normal morning, goes into work, is questioned by the police, finds his dead friend, and then by the evening has grown a thin layer of stubble. Is it possible to grow facial hair out of stress? Is that what's happening? Does he have to shave like every 6 hours to keep his fresh-faced style, and then he just didn't shave because he was too distressed? I don't understand. I also like when Willow yelled at Xander and Cordelia to shut up. Yes, go Willow. Also, I know that her plan involved getting Angel to help, but when everything was going bad at the very end there, and then Angel busts through the door, and we haven't seen him all episode, and he just shows up, I was like, wait, what? Deus Ex Angel? It felt very weird and out of place. Also, I like Ethan Rayne as a villain. He's kind of fun. I hope we see more of him in the future. What's my line? Part 1. Buffy joins forces with another Slayer in hopes of saving Angel from the clutches of Spike and Drusilla. That is completely wrong. That's probably supposed to be part 2. Yeah, it's the It's the same synopsis as part 2. That's part 2. That's kind of a spoiler for what happens in part 2. Great, awesome, thank you, Amazon. In that case, here's my own synopsis. This is the episode where Spike's like, "Hey Drusilla, we're gonna fix you," and she's like, "Oh, will we please do that, baby?" And so then he's like, "I'm gonna send 3 assassins after Buffy." So, "Oh, that's going to work fantastically, baby." I kind of take issue with this episode, and yes, I know, taking issue with an episode that has Spike and Drusilla in it, I know, it's unheard of. My main issue is that the assassins aren't really built up in any way at all, and even Giles says, some are human, some are not. So some of them are human, and Buffy as the Slayer is supposed to have some kind of superhuman strength, right? At least that's what's been shown, whether that's meant to be the case or not. And also, they make a point of her being really frightened of them in this episode. Like, really properly spooked. But she only learns about them after she takes out the first one. So, like, I don't know, I think it's done in a weird way, but I'm gonna go watch part 2 now. Before I do, though, one more thing I wanted to mention. I do like Drusilla's, when Spike yells at her, "Oh," and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, love." Gets me every time.
Episode 10.
What's My Line? Part 2. Exactly the same synopsis as last time. I like Kendra. I think she's really cool, apart from the whole being really stubborn about having your own life besides being a Slayer bit. I gotta say, when Buffy kept on talking about how maybe after all of this, she wouldn't have to be the Slayer anymore because there's already another Slayer, she could go and live a normal life, I fully expected Kendra to end up dead at the end of the episode, but she didn't. She just kind of said, "No, Buffy, you are definitely a Slayer," and Buffy kind of went, "Yeah, I guess I am." I thought she would end up dead for that reason, and also because they would want to deal with the problem of having another Slayer in that universe, but I guess maybe they do that at a later point, or they just don't address it again, I don't know. I saw the kiss between Xander and Cordelia happening from about 17 episodes away. Also, Xander, what is it with you and bugs? That was a great line. At least Cordelia isn't a giant praying mantis, although she does exhibit some of the same characteristics when you think about it.
Episode 11. Ted.
A grown man and his fully intelligent toy bear smoke weed every day. Wait, no, hang on a minute, wrong one.
When Buffy's mother is romanced by a computer software salesman named Ted,
Buffy's uneasy feelings cause her to launch a background investigation. So close, Amazon, yet so far. She didn't launch the investigation, she straight up killed him. It was her friends who launched the investigation, but A for effort. While I can't say I particularly enjoyed seeing the late great John Ritter in a particularly evil role like that one, it was pretty amazing to see him just flip when he was glitching out at the end, to flip from being like, "Oh, we should go over and do this. Kill 'em all, kill 'em all." And like, you know, he wasn't saying that, but it was stuff like that where he would just flip from one extreme to the other as he glitched through his emotions. That was pretty good acting. Other than that, though, the evil stepdad vibes in this episode weren't much fun until it turned out that he was an evil robot, and then it kind of got more interesting from it. Actually, no, it got more interesting when Buffy straight up killed him. It was fun to play with a dynamic of like, oh wait, shit, Buffy did a bad thing? Oh no, at least for a little while. That brings us to the end of this video, and if you're sat there going, wait a minute, but that was only the first half of the season, well then, do I have news for you. The next video will be the second half of the season, that's the news. It will be episodes 12 to 22, which should work out great. Don't know why I hesitated. See you in a week or two, because my watch pace varies wildly.